According to the first, the effect of novelty kept the boys near the black and white Soviet TV for many hours, but they quickly got tired of playing the same thing for a long time. The internal fire that is present in all children and does not allow them to sit still again drew the boys outside, into the yard. There they were left alone with their imagination, and no television could convey what was happening in their small and violent head. The main source of inspiration was, of course, television. Hollywood action films, which were gaining momentum at that time, in which you could tell at first glance who would be the villain, had a huge influence on the guys. One day at about 9 in the evening, just when Andrei's parents began to send Andrei to bed, were very strict in this matter. His future idol, then not yet completely bald, Bruce Willis, appeared on the blue screen. The character he played was a policeman, and this was already enough for Andrei, using all his childish charm, to begin begging for a delay in sleep. The parents naturally did not deviate from their principles and forcibly put their son to bed, but he was not going to give up. Quietly, like a little mouse, he crept along the corridor to the living room and, standing in his shorts, courageously watched the entire film through a tiny crack in the door. With his mouth open, he watched as for an hour and a half everyone tried to kill the poor bald cop. Andrei was deeply struck by the will to live and courage of this lone warrior. Despite all his wounds, he was still able to get away with it and defeat the main villain. The evening of the next day, Andrei, with all his characteristic enthusiasm, told his friend, who missed this in his opinion, masterpiece film, how Bruce Willis crawled through the ventilation in a bloody t-shirt and with a lighter in his hand. Seryosha, being a fan of genres more abstract from reality, did not share such enthusiasm, but he understood the general message. In the near future, they will shoot a lot. This is how life lived for two boys from house number 5 on Stroitley Street. Each new film immersed them in its reality and spurred their imagination. One day Seryosha had a big quarrel with his parents. They, like all decent and responsible adults, did not allow their only son to leave the yard. From the windows of their apartment, they could clearly see the place where the boys usually played, and this gave them the illusion of control. And it was easy to invite their son to dinner by simply shouting through the window. Seryosha, in turn, wanted more. His imagination had already outgrown the small court. He was fed up with these creaky swings and the dilapidated cinder block fence, especially since behind this same fence there was a local clinic, and the area adjacent to it was superior to Seryosha's yard in all respects. A large field with neatly mown grass and sheltered from all winds by trees, planted long ago, beckoned the 9-year-old dreamer with its open But Mom, Seryosha stood with a diary in his hand. You promised that you would allow me to take a walk in the clinic. Here, he handed the diary to his mother. She sighed heavily, put down the unwashed plate, and wiped her hands with a small kitchen towel. You know, Dad and I are worried about you, but you won't be visible behind the fence. What if something happens? She took the diary and flipped through a couple of pages. Well, Mom, Seryosha drawled offendedly. What could happen? Nothing happened in the yard, right? Don't renounce money or prison. The mother answered and pointed her finger at the diary. Where is the literature homework for Saturday? Oh, we had a test and weren't asked anything. Oh, as last time. The woman frowned, and Seryosha shook his head negatively. Let me call Anya and check. Oh, but Mom, Anya studied with Seryosha in the same class, and unlike him, got straight A's, proudly 5B. His mother often called her to catch her son in a lie, and at times she succeeded. Hello, Anya. This is Seryosha's mother. Hello, she habitually jabbered into the phone. Stop embarrassing me. Her son tugged at her apron, but she didn't pay attention to him and continued. Could you tell me what you were assigned for literature on Saturday? Yes, of course. I'll wait. Yeah, thank you. Sorry for the trouble. The woman hung up and returned the diary to her son. Do you see? I kept my promise. Now, can I go play at the clinic? I already told you, Dad, and I will be very worried. You don't want us to worry, do you? It's not fair. I did everything you wanted. Seryosha shouted offendedly. Not a single CE grade in a week. I did all my homework, cleaned the house. What else do you need? I just need you to behave decently, not lie to your mother and study, at least with straight A's. Yeah. But in the end, you'll still say that I should have done it anyway and won't let me go for a walk. You yourself are a liar and do only what you need. Don't go there, don't do it, Dad and I are worried. You are only hiding behind these worries of yours to force me to do what you want. Sergey, don't you dare talk to your mother like that. The father shouted from the hall, and you don't care at all. The boy snapped. You just lie on the sofa and watch football. After such statements, Seryosha had a long evening of reflection on the topic of justice. He stood in the corner and looked at the old, slightly yellowed wallpaper. When I run away from home, they'll understand everything, he thought. They'll cry and ask him to come back. But I'll never come back. Then we'll see how worried you are about me, you deceivers. A week later, the parents changed their anger to mercy, and Seryosha again went out for a walk in the yard that he was so disgusted with. He walked across the grass to the remains of the fence, behind which lay the fabulous expanses of the unexplored country Polyklandia, looked at them with a sad look, and sighed heavily. Andrei came out of the entrance and saw his friend sitting on an old slide, rusted to holes, and thoughtfully looking into the distance. "Hey, Seryoga," he shouted joyfully and ran closer. "Did you watch a movie with Stallone yesterday? They finally flew away. They climbed the mountains, and the man fell down. Guess what?" And Stallone was like, "No." Seryosha did not react in any way to his friend's story and only sighed heavily. "Why are you so sad?" Andrei asked and pulled him by the trouser leg, but he nervously pulled his leg back. Come on. What are you doing?" "Well, I got a double ban, so that's okay. If they kick you out of school, then yes, but so, what does double ban have to do with it?" Seryosha interrupted him. "Well, how do I know? You are silent like a partisan. You yourself are a partisan. My parents don't let me into the clinic, but I really want to take a walk there. So we had a fight." He jumped off the hill and went up to the fence again. "Look at how much space there is. You can run straight there for more than 10 seconds and not at all, that you can't resist. There's no way this could happen in the yard." "And what's stopping you?" Andrei was surprised. "The hole in the fence is up to your waist. Take it and climb over." "You can't. My mother says that I should only walk where she can see me from the window, but I can't be seen behind the fence." "What are you doing?" "These are adults. They say this just to say it. The main thing for them is to calm themselves down, and where you walk is completely unimportant in terms of UAS Seryosha." "Well, look." Andrei sharply stepped forward and pushed his friend in the chest, so hard that he, losing his balance, fell over an old cinder block and fell into the courtyard of the clinic. Come on. Seryosha came to his senses and jumped to his feet. "They'll lock me at home again for a week." He tried to climb back to the allowed side, but Andrei did not let him do this, pushing him again. "Quiet, do you hear?" the boy asked, putting his finger to his lips. Seryosha listened, but heard nothing except the singing of birds and the rustling of tires. Cars rarely passing by. "No," he answered, puzzled. "What was I supposed to hear?" "The screams of your worried parents." At that moment, Seryosha realized what his friend was trying to show him. Meanwhile, Andrei jumped over the fence in one deft movement. "See, I told you that they are not following you. All their stories are nonsense. Dust in the eyes. They convinced you that they were closely watching you all the time, and you were dumbfounded." "But why do this?" Seryosha asked, puzzled and a little offended. "Well, why is this? You think that your ancestors are watching your every move and that you are behaving well, but all this time they are calmly going about their business. A very cunning trick. You seem to control yourself. As I grow up, I will use it constantly." Seryosha carefully looked through the fence at the windows of his apartment. Ordinary wooden windows, painted a raunchy brown. He never understood what could push a person to buy such paint, although most likely either there was no other one, or this one was cheaper than the other. The window was closed, and behind the glass a dimly lit corridor was visible. This was good, because Seryosha expected to see his mother's disappointed face or his father's stern look, saying that the corner in the living room was waiting for the little intruder, but there was no one behind the glass. "Well, why are you frozen?" Andrei pulled his friend by the hand. "Come on. You wanted to take a walk here." Yes, Seryosha nodded confusedly. He had mixed feelings. On the one hand, he was brazenly deceived by his own parents, and on the other, he now gained access to the treasured Polyland. Isn't that what he wanted? He gained freedom of movement, but it did not bring him joy. "Let's go already. You'll miss all the fun." With these words, Andre folded his fingers as if he were holding a pistol and looking around as if a real secret agent ran across the green grass. Seriosha was not taken aback and, snatching his weapon from his bosom, ran after him. The boys had never had such shootouts before. The large open space gave them room to maneuver, and the number of bad guys attacking them exceeded all imaginable proportions. Andre, dodging spears and grenades, imagined himself as a balding, but not giving up policeman, and tumbled over the neatly mown grass. Seriosha hid behind the trees and, occasionally peeking out, covered his friend with heavy fire. The battle lasted several hours and fascinated the boys so much that they completely forgot about time. The sun had already set to the horizon when the last enemy fushu. Andre exhaled, lying on the grass and trying to catch his breath. It was fun. Yeah. Seriosha fell down next to him and stared at the yellowed sky. "Your mother will scold you," he said after a short pause. "Whose?" Andre was surprised. "And you're all green." The boy rose up on his elbows and looked at his clothes. There were green spots here, and they're left by thick grass. "Yes, it's nonsense." He waved it off. "It will wash off." "No, I once played football at school during physical education, and the same heels remained on my knees, so my mother had to sew on leather pads so as not to throw away my pants." "Yes." Andre got to his feet and tried to wipe off the green blots, but nothing came of it. Damn. Well, it's okay, he'll scold and forgive. Seriosha examined himself in search of the same stains, but apparently he was luckier, and his clothes turned out to be just slightly dusty. He stood up, brushed himself off, and walked towards the fence. "Wait." Andre caught up with him and pulled him by the hand. "Where are you going?" "Oh, how to where?" Seriosha asked in surprise. "You, into the yard." "What are you doing?" "What yard?" "Which one?" "The one I live in. It's already getting dark and it's better to stay there if Mom calls. You're a bore." "What else can I say?" Andre snorted feigning extreme disappointment with his friend. "Why am I a bore, huh?" Seriosha was even more surprised. "And that one? You yourself wanted to take a walk here, but now you're in such a hurry to get back." So have you gone for a walk already? And you call this a walk?" "This is just the beginning. We didn't even look at the clinic." "Let's go too." He pulled his friend along with him. "Why look there? I walk past it every day from school. I've seen enough." "But no wonder. Our house from the street is not at all the same as from the yard. And here, I'm sure, everything is the same." Andre thought for a second. "Listen, what if they have a bomb shelter? With us, everything was brewed a long time ago, and this is a hospital after all. Let's go look." Seriosha did not resist for long. Of course, he didn't want to get screwed by his mother, but the thirst for discovery and childish abstraction from far-reaching consequences made the decisive choice for him. The building really looked different from the back. It was nothing like what he saw every day on his way home. Most likely, the facade was recently renovated, unlike everything else. The old plaster had fallen off in places, forming unsightly bald spots. The bars on the first-floor windows were rusty, and the paint on the frames was peeling. Some glass was cracked and reinforced with smaller pieces, most likely to prevent drafts. The sun finally crossed the horizon, and the shadows that fell on the clinic gave it a touch of mystery and sadness. Having walked around the building, the boys did not find anything resembling a bomb shelter, which disappointed them a little, but Andre did not let up. "Come here." He beckoned his friend closer to the wall. "Somehow I don't feel at ease here." Seriosha shuddered. "Maybe we should go back." "Don't whine." Andre wrinkled his nose. "It's better to give me a lift." He pointed his finger at a cornice protruding from the wall. Builders call it an extension slab, and it serves to strengthen the structure, but the boy was going to use it for other purposes. "Oh, what do you want?" Seriosha asked his friend and hesitantly came closer. What, Capsto? You never listen to me, do you? I told you about the movie with Stool." "Yes." Seriosha was surprised. "Balda." Andre snapped. "While you and I were walking around the clinic, I noticed that this cornice runs along the entire house. You give me a lift, and I'll pull you up, and we'll walk around it in a circle, like real climbers." "Cool." "Actually, yes. But I would still go home already. What if my mother calls me for dinner?" "But I don't hear." "Oh, don't be afraid. We'll walk quickly and go straight home." "You." Do you promise? Yeah, Andre nodded confidently. Seriosha looked around. There was not a soul around. There were almost no cars on the street. Most likely, all the hard workers were now sitting at home and enjoying a delicious dinner after a hard day of work. Okay, but just quickly. He clasped his fingers and put Andra under his leg. He leaned on them as if they were steps and pulled himself up onto the ledge, then offered his hand to Seriosha. The boys, pressing their bellies against the wall, moved with side steps along the building. We had to walk slowly. In some places, the cornice was covered with a thick layer of crumbling plaster mixed with dust and looked more like a sloping slope. It was necessary to step carefully, because due to the unevenness of the landscape, the height of the outrigger slab in some places reached a couple of meters, and this is already a serious fall. In one place, the cornice became so narrow that the leg could no longer fit completely on it. Andre went first. Taking a deep breath, he held his breath, stood on his toes, and carefully walked through the dangerous place. Seriosha froze for a second and looked down, a typical mistake of novice climbers. It was at least 1.5 meters to the ground, and for a 9-year-old boy, this is practically a bottomless abyss. Fear instantly froze all my muscles. Well, why are you stuck there? Andreas shouted, but his friend did not answer. He continued to look down. It was clear from his eyes that he was unable to take a single step further. Seriosha? Andre called. You, look at me. The boy slowly turned his gaze to his friend. Listen, there's nothing complicated here. Just don't think about the ground. I can't. Seriosha answered in a trembling voice. What if I fall? You won't fall. Just don't look down. Where should I look then? Look at the wall. Just walk and look at the wall. In 10 steps, it will all be over. The main thing is to walk and don't think about the height. Seriosha turned to face the wall. The yellow plaster was a couple of centimeters away from his nose. With every cell of his body, he regretted that he had agreed to climb onto that stupid cornice. He could now sit in his yard, so familiar, and he would just sit and watch the windows light up in the house, one after another, and imagine what people were doing in their apartments. He took the first step. Here the old lady from the first floor turned on the light in the kitchen. She wants to put the kettle on the stove and brew herself some chamomile tea. Most likely, she got a little excited when she looked at the field of miracles. 2 more steps. A small cloud of dust flew out from under Seriosha's foot, but he did not. Before his eyes was a yellow wall that occupied the entire field of vision. And in his head, a young couple with a baby were sitting in the living room and watching TV, which cast strange reflections on the window. 2 more steps and half the way is done. It's not so scary, thought Seriosha, and again repeated his mistake and looked down. The earth was still far away. His heart beat faster and he turned to the wall. The little girl went out onto the balcony and looked sadly from above. She never went out for walks. Most likely she was sick with something. The fantasies calmed Seriosha a little, and he took 2 more steps. Come on. Andre extended his hand to his friend and lightly patted the wall with his palm, attracting his attention. There's just a little bit left. Gathering the remnants of his courage, Seriosha literally ran the last 3 steps and grabbed Andre's warm, but dirty hand so tightly, as if his life depended on it. You see, everything worked out for you, but you are afraid. Seriosha wanted to tell him everything he thought about this whole mountain climbing thing, but the boy smiled and, without waiting for an answer, dived under the windowsill, which blocked the path further. Thinking that the sooner he allowed Andre to reach the end, the sooner they would return home. Seriosha followed. He did not crawl under the windowsill. His legs were not yet fully functional, and to tell the truth, he generally doubted that he would be able to see. Instead, he grabbed the window frame and tried to walk at full height, simply leaning back. Standing on his toes and clinging to the cool cement with his fingers, he shifted his center of gravity and hung above the ground, trying to reach the opposite edge of the window with his other hand. Staggering slightly, he ran his fingers along the slope, but was unable to grab it properly. Sighing heavily, he tried again, and this time he managed to reach it. All that remained was to tighten his leg, and he would have been relatively safe, but out of the corner of his eye, Seriosha noticed some movement behind the glass. Turning his head, he saw his own reflection. There were no light sources in the room outside the window, and the glass turned into a kind of mirror. Seriosha looked at the reflection, but knew that he saw something else there, inside. He peered intently into the darkness for several seconds, and seconds dragged on one after another, but Seriosha did not stop watching. He knew that there was something there. Some subtle movement did not allow him to look away. For a moment he forgot about his fear of heights, about his yard, and about Andrei, who was standing on his toes and holding onto the slopes. He hung as if crucified, at a 2-meter height, and like a predator looked out for prey. A face emerged from the darkness, like a jack-in-the-box, wrinkled and slightly yellowish. Small black beady eyes stared angrily at Seriosha. The boy was waiting for something like this. After all these Hollywood films, he expected exactly this, but despite all his preparedness, he reflexively pulled away from the glass. His hands trembled and slid along the slope. Seriosha fell. As if in slow motion, he watched the window moving away from him, his fingers trying to grab the curved tin windowsill, but flying a millimeter from the target. His feet come off the ledge, and Seriosha experiences for the first time in his life the sensation of free fall, lightness, and unusual trembling somewhere in the stomach. The yellow wall of the clinic gave way to the dark blue evening sky. Several stars were already breaking through the city light. Seriosha managed to count 6, but the asphalt did not allow him to finish. The blow was hard and painful. The back touched the ground first, and then the head. At first, the boy decided that someone had set off fireworks in his gas. The surrounding reality trembled slightly and disappeared, plunging him into cool and silent. "Hey, alive!" The darkness gradually dissipated, and Seriosha came to his senses. He opened his eyes and saw that same wrinkled and slightly yellowish face looming over him. Its owner was a man of about 50 in an old faded windbreaker and sweatpants with "Hey, how are you?" asked Andrei, who was standing nearby. Seriosha stood up and felt the back of his head. A small lump swelled on it. "Yes, everything seems fine," he answered. "But what happened? You fell off the ledge and apparently hit your head hard." The man helped Seriosha get to his feet. "I'm sitting, not bothering anyone, solving the crossword puzzle. Suddenly, I hear voices. Well, I think thieves are coming. I went to look, and there you were hanging from the window. Well, I wanted to scare you so that you wouldn't get into trouble, but just go ahead and fall. Are you scared?" "There is a little," answered Seriosha. "Oh, what are you doing here anyway, huh? Why the hell are you hanging around the eaves?" "It's just like that." Andrei put on his friendliest smile. "We're playing climbers." So how is it?" "Your friend has probably already played enough." The watchman ran his hand over the back of Seriosha's head. "Aren't you feeling dizzy?" "It hurts a little." "No wonder, from such a height he fell. How did you even climb so high?" "Are you going to scold us?" asked Seriosha, anticipating a good thrashing. He already imagined a long evening in a corner in the corridor. "Why do strangers complain to us about you? What kind of idiot are you growing up to be? Look at the wall and think about your behavior. Maybe you'll finally understand something, as if that ever helped." "Why should I scold you?" The watchman chuckled. "Wasn't I a child or something? Oh, so we won't get into trouble." Andrei was surprised. No, the man smiled somehow unpleasantly and coldly. This smile sent a slight chill down Seriosha's spine. Both fangs on the guard's upper jaw were covered with gold crowns, which gave him a predatory and aggressive appearance. "What's your name, guys?" "I am Andrei." The watchman nodded and turned his gaze to Seriosha. The boy was silent. He didn't want to talk. He didn't like those gold teeth and beady eyes, which seemed to be constantly looking for something in him, some slightest weakness, so that they would certainly take advantage of it later. "Don't be afraid. I don't bite." The man bent down and extended his hand forward. "Everyone calls me Uncle Kalya. I guard the clinic so that thieves don't." "Seriosha," the boy answered sharply, but did not shake his hand. "Don't pay any attention," Andrei intervened. "He just doesn't like strangers." "I see." Uncle Kalya straightened up and patted his pockets in search of cigarettes, and I already thought that he was scared of me. "No," Andrei drawled, "we are not the shy ones." Not finding the treasured pack of Bellamore in his sun-reddened windbreaker, Uncle Kalya clicked his tongue in disappointment and shivered. "Okay, brave men, I went on to guard and you are no longer here. Don't climb on the windows, otherwise I'll scold you." The boys nodded and trudged towards the yard, and the watchman went to his post. But when he reached the threshold of the clinic, he stopped abruptly as if he remembered something, then turned around and called out to the guys. "Hey, climbers, come here." He beckoned them with his hand. The boys looked at each other. "What else does he need?" Shirioja whispered with suspicion. "You never know." Andre answered, "Let's go find out." "I don't like him. He's kind of strange." "Again, you're on your own, whining and whining like a sore." "Okay, stay here and I'll go myself." Andre ran to the back door of the clinic. After hesitating for a second, Shirioja ran after him. It was already quite dark outside, and he didn't want to be left alone in an unknown place. "Listen," Uncle Kalia said, when the boys ran a little closer. "How about an excursion?" The guy stopped immediately. "Excursions?" Andre asked, squinting, taking his friend's hand. Once he saw a similar situation in a movie, it all ended in kidnapping and murder. The watchman noticed this incredulous squint and hastened to correct the situation. "Don't think anything like that." He again began to look for a pack of cigarettes in the pockets of his windbreaker. "I'm just sitting here all alone, and sometimes it gets a little boring and—" "Oh." He remembered that he was already looking for Bellamore and nervously pulled his hands out of his pockets. "I'm lonely. That's what." "Oh, lonely?" Andre asked, squeezing his friend's hand even tighter. "Yay." Uncle Kalia nodded. "I'll show you the clinic. Let's chat about this and that." "It's quiet here in the evening, not a soul." The boys looked at each other. A firm no was read in Shirioja's eyes, but Andre still had doubts. There was a struggle in his head between curiosity and common sense. He had never walked around an adult clinic before, much less in the evening when there was no one in the building. The walk promised to be exciting. Noticing doubt, the watchman decided to add that he did not scold them for the cornice, which means he is on their side and can be trusted. "Well, let's go." Andre asked his friend in a whisper. "Which one did you go? What are you, a fool?" Shirioja was clearly nervous. "Have you seen him? Typical movie villain. What if he bans us there and tortures us or—" "Well, here you are whining again." Andre did not let him finish. "You wanted to come here yourself, right? And now you're giving up all the fun for which you broke your parents' ban. I don't understand you. Just kill me." "What is there to understand? It's already dark. It's time for us to go home and have dinner, and you and a stranger are getting ready to go for a walk. Do you notice anything strange?" "No." He snapped and let go of his hand. You can go home to mommy, but I'll stay here." "Oh, what about your friend?" the watchman asked when Andre came closer. "Nothing. He's a girl, that's all." Uncle Kalia chuckled indifferently and opened the door. Shirioja stood and watched as his friend and the unknown man disappeared through the doorway. He watched as his faithful comrade was perhaps heading towards inevitable death, but he could not help himself. The fear of his father's belt kept him in place. Although in reality, it was just an excuse for himself. He received scoldings from his parents many times and was no longer afraid of any belts. In reality, Uncle Kalia scared him. His yellowish, wrinkled face jumped out at Shirioja from the darkness again and again. It appeared before his eyes every time he blinked. The face grinned with a cold and evil smile, and in the depths of the partly open mouth glinted a pair of golden fangs. "No, I'm not a girl at all," thought Shirioja and ducked through the closing door. The inside of the clinic didn't look much better than the outside. Either the authorities openly stole the money allocated for repairs, or they were not allocated at all. The floor was covered with old tiles, small and tasteless. They changed it so long ago that in some places it was cracked, and in some places it was completely worn out. According to the old Soviet tradition, the walls were painted dark green up to the middle, and the rest, including the ceiling, was whitewashed. Gray concrete could be seen here and there through a layer of chalk that had become thin with age. Shirioja ducked under the arm of the surprised Uncle Kalia, who was already reaching for the door to close it, and nothing happened, and stood next to his friend. "Oh, you were going home?" Andre muttered with slight dissatisfaction. "I don't abandon my people in trouble," Shirioja whispered in response. "What other trouble? When he starts killing you, you'll know right away." "What are you whispering there?" Uncle Kalia locked the back door with one deft movement. "Nothing." Shirioja grabbed Andre's hand again. "Why do you lock the doors? Why is this so?" The watchman was surprised. Why? The authorities ordered to keep everything locked. "Well, here I go out for a smoke break, so sometimes I open it, but everything is always locked." Otherwise, if you don't lock it, it turns out that whoever wants to come in, take whatever you want. Why am I needed then?" Uncle Kalia smiled his unpleasant predatory smile and walked along the corridor. The children followed him. Without saying a word, he led them into the central hall. There was a reception area where all patients' cards were kept. It was fenced off from the rest of the space by a wooden wall with small glass windows. So, where to start? The watchman scratched his chin thoughtfully. Short and stiff stubble crackled under his fingers. Well, there's a reception area. That's understandable. Here fat women drink tea all day long. There's a pharmacy there, but it's closed. What else? Oh, exactly. He squeezed waist deep through one of the windows and a second later climbed back out with the key in his hand. Wow. Uncle Kalia proudly showed the key to the children. Come on, I'll show you the pieces of iron. He turned around and motioned for the children to go ahead. A common corridor divided the entire building into two halves. On both sides of the corridor, there were countless offices and a pair of stairs to the second floor. The 8th office, Uncle Kalia pointed in the direction with his finger. The boys approached the door. There was a sign on it. Surgeon. The watchman inserted the key into the keyhole and turned it, but the lock did not budge. In general, everyone here is locked at night, and the keys are hidden somewhere. They don't entrust them to me. But today Pavel Genadievich apparently got overworked. He pulled out the key and blew on it, as if this was supposed to help open the lock. He's calling me from home. Here I have a telephone at my post, just in case, so that I can call the police if anything happens. Yeah, he calls and says he forgot to lock the office. Uncle Cole, he says, will you lock me up? Why shouldn't I lock it? I locked it, of course. The lock finally clicked and opened. Well, come in, dear guests. The office was small. There was a table against the wall, at which, apparently, the doctor sat during his working hours. On the walls hung eerie posters with images of the muscular system and internal organs of a person. There was a brown couch, a small wardrobe, and a screen by the window. As soon as the boys entered the room, a strong, unpleasant smell hit Seryozha's nose. This remains in every hospital after evening disinfection. Look, I'll show you. The watchman opened the closet door and stuck his hand into the gap that had formed. There was a cold, metallic tinkling sound, and Uncle Kalia brought out some oblong, flat object. In the twilight, Seryozha did not immediately understand what it was, but upon closer inspection, he saw that the watchman was holding surgical scissors in his hands. Have you seen it? He turned them over in front of the guy's eyes. Lightning flashed outside the window, and a cold glare ran across the surface of the metal. Spring thunderstorms had a bad habit of coming quickly, without warning, and then having passed large drops of rain on the asphalt, ending just as quickly. Are these scissors? Andrei asked. His voice lost its former confidence. Yeah, the watchman nodded. They are the same. Do you know what they do with them? The boys shook their heads negatively. They're cutting. The watchman shouted the last word so sharply that Seryozha jumped on the spot. A roll of thunder, along with Uncle Kalia's laughter, rolled through the empty corridors of the clinic. You know, Andrei pulled his friend by the hand towards the door. We probably have to go. So fast. I haven't shown you everything yet. Yes, we'd better come during the day with our parents. They're probably already looking for us. Moreover, it's going to rain outside. Shall we go? The boy's intonation turned out to be slightly interrogative. It lacked rigidity and gave the impression that he was asking the harmful teacher to go to the toilet during class. Will you go? No, I don't think you'll stay for long. Or do you want me to tell the police how you tried to climb into a government office through a window? Want? The children shook their heads again. I could call them and tell them that a couple of local guys wanted to steal some drugs from the pharmacy. Drug addicts, I guess. Do you know how the police love juvenile drug addicts? I will tell you. They hit them on the sides with rubber batons. Yes, they hit you right in the ribs. And the batons are special. They don't cause bruises. They also pour water on me and don't let me sleep. They don't give it for a long time. Do you want this? No, tears appeared in Seryozha's eyes. Please let us go. We won't walk here anymore, honestly. Yes, honestly. Andrei picked up, and Seryozha could no longer restrain himself and howled like a fire sirena. Well, you've had enough of creating dampness. The watchman clicked his scissors a couple of times in front of his nose. "I'll let you go, so be it, but with a condition. First, you have to entertain the old man." Somewhere in the distance, lightning cut the sky again, and yellow fangs flashed in the twilight of the office. "Oh, entertain." Andre's face turned pale. "You see, cheer Uncle Collier and you'll go home. But if not, I'll call the police. Or should I tell you a joke or something? An anecdote?" The watchman chuckled displeasedly. "Moo. I'm here every night. All I do is read jokes in the newspaper. Do you think they can still cheer me up?" Suryaza leaned his cheek, wet from tears, against Andre's face and whispered something in his ear. At first he recoiled, but after a second he nodded and turned to the watchman and asked, "Let's play hide and seek." Uncle Collier broke into a smile. "Hide and seek." He snapped the scissors again. "Hide and seek is interesting. Let's play, just don't cheat. I count to 50. He hid behind the screen behind which patients usually changed clothes and began to count. Without thinking twice, the boys rushed to the exit. They rushed headlong across the old tiles, and from somewhere behind them came a hoarse voice. 5, 6. Having reached the main entrance to the clinic, they began to look for the treasured handle, one turn of which separated them from freedom, but it was not there. The doors on both sides were locked with a key. "Back door," Andrei shouted, but Seryosha stopped him. "It's the same there." He sat down on the cold floor and covered his face with his hands. "So what now?" "Hey, I don't know. You can try through the window, but in my opinion, there are bars everywhere. So we'll come up with something else. The main thing is not to give up." Andrei grabbed his friend by the shoulders. "We will hide so well that this little guy will think that we managed to escape. And when he goes out for another smoke break, that's when we'll sneak. But you heard it yourself. Everyone is locked up at night. Where will we hide?" "Free from the depths of the corridor," I heard. 49. 50. I'm going to look. It's not my fault who didn't hide. In the toilet, Andrei grabbed his friend and pulled him to his feet. "Did you go with me to prove that you're not a girl? So stop whining and start proving." Uncle Collier walked out of the surgeon's office and locked it. He threw the key back into the reception window. He had worked as a night watchman at this clinic for many years and knew every nook and cranny of the building. All the rooms were undoubtedly locked, now including the surgical room. He checked them himself every evening. It was part of his job. The boys simply had nowhere to go. Each floor was visible from the beginning to the very end, and it was possible to hide only in the never-closing toilets. All that remained was to methodically check each one, 2 toilets per floor. 4 floors. A total of 8 checks, as easy as whistling Slavyanka's farewell, and sometimes clicking his surgical scissors to the beat. Uncle Collier began his evening rounds. "The first floor is empty. The second one too." The lightning flashed more and more often, and the pause after which the thunder echoed through the corridors of the clinic became less and less frequent. The storm was approaching. On the 3rd floor, in one of the toilets, the guard found an open window. Of course, this was a trick. There was neither a cornice nor a balcony under the window, and to assume that the children managed to jump from such a height and survive is simply, "Oh, you little ones," Collier squinted. "Did you decide to deceive me?" "Oh well." He looked out the window just to make sure there weren't 2 small corpses on the ground below him. That would be unpleasant. He would have a lot of problems if these boys decided to do such a desperate act, but everything was fine, as he expected. No phones. "I thought so." The watchman muttered and took hold of the window frame to close it. But suddenly, his eyes widened. Uncle Collier remembered one feature that unites almost all buildings. He looked outside again, but this time he didn't look down. Turning his head to the right, he saw a fire escape. How could he forget about the fire escape? Such a mistake is simply unforgivable. Those bastards. He slammed the window and ran to the stairs. They couldn't have gone far, thought Uncle Collier as he went downstairs. He remembered very well that all the fire escapes, and there were 3 of them in the building, were cut off at the level of the 2nd floor back in the late 80s. This was a necessary precaution, because in the event of a fire, falling from such a height is not scary. In any case, no worse than suffocating in the smoke or being burned alive. But jumping onto such a ladder from the street is an almost impossible. While running through the 2nd floor, the watchman wondered how far the boys could have gone. They were able to jump from the fire escape, But such a fall was clearly not without injuries. This should have slowed them down considerably, meaning there was still a chance of catching up to them before they could call for help. The children, in turn, took advantage of the watchman's slowness and self-confidence. Trying to move as quietly as possible, they climbed to the third floor and opened the window, thereby creating the impression of a desperate escape. Then, listening to Slavianka's farewell, as if it were a warning of danger, they walked around Uncle Kalia along the opposite staircase and went down to the first floor. The watchman walked quickly along the wooden wall, enclosing the register. The floors of the windbreakers, reddened by the sun, frayed as they walked. We had to hurry, because the boys could stumble upon some lonely passerby and tell him everything. Suddenly, Uncle Kalia stopped dead in his tracks. Something flashed through his head, some vague image, a slight doubt that hovered in the back of his mind, but did not dare to come into the light. Why was the window open on the third floor? Why not on the second? After all, it would have been much easier and faster to go down from the second floor. Maybe they panicked and thought about the stairs too late, or didn't go down it at all. What if the open window is a distraction, an attempt to get me to open the back door? The watchman looked through the register window. The key to the surgeon's office was not on the table. "Oh, you cunning people," he hissed, and, trying not to make unnecessary sounds, moved towards the door with the number 8. Seriosha and Andrei were sitting on the floor behind the screen. They listened to the silence of the empty clinic, occasionally broken by the roar of an approaching thunderstorm. Holding their breath, they waited for the treasured sound of the back door being unlocked. It seemed to Seriosha that he had cried all the tears he had. He simply could not cry anymore, and leaning his back against the cool wall, he moaned quietly, out of habit. He tried to escape into his imagination, to hide from the terrible reality in yet another fictional world. But his head simply refused to work. Maybe the fear was so strong that it completely shackled his imagination, or his brain was telling him that consciousness was needed here and now. One way or another, he had to put up with everything that was happening and face the problem head-on, perhaps for the first time in his life. Andrei, in turn, lost all his former passion. He scolded himself for managing to get into such a mess, for once again, instead of thinking carefully, he succumbed to an impulse, a momentary desire. But most of all, he reproached himself for allowing his friend to follow him. "He's here now because of me. If it weren't for me, he'd be sitting at home right now having dinner in peace." Girl, I called him a girl. Would Bruce Willis have done that? I think not. Andrei quickly stood up, opened the cabinet in which medical instruments were stored, and looked inside. "Hey, what are you doing?" Seriosha pulled him by the trouser leg, trying to drag him back behind the scroll. "I'm looking for weapons." "What other weapon?" "Come back. What if he comes in and sees you? It's all my fault. And it's up to me to answer." He tried to see the contents of the closet, but it was too dark in the office, and he had to look for a suitable item by touch. "I should have listened to you." "Then you'll whine. You'll give us away." Feeling something sharp, Andrei took a sharp breath and pulled his hand back. A small trickle of blood flowed from the index finger. He reflexively put his finger in his mouth, and with his other hand, he carefully removed from the closet what he had cut himself with. It was a scalpel. The handle was metallic and cool to the touch. Andrei sat down next to his friend and showed him his find. "And what are you going to do with him?" asked Seriosha. "You know what? If it comes to that, if it comes to something, there's nothing you can do. He is much stronger than the two of us." It caused Seriosha stopped mid-sentence. He froze and motioned for his friend to remain silent. The boys sat and listened to the silence. What at first seemed to Andrei to be the rustle of the wind raging outside was not it at all. This sound was made by the watchman's sweatpants, old, slightly dirty synthetic pants with 3 white stripes on the sides. No matter how quietly Uncle Kalia tried to move, the rustling of the polyester treacherously gave away his approach. The rustling was getting closer and closer. The boys huddled close to each other. Seriosha knew that the plan did not work, because if Uncle Kalia believed in their deception, he would now be in a hurry to the exit and loudly stomp his boots on the old brown tiles along the way. But he was sneaking, which means he knew that they were. The rustling became more distinct and louder. He was getting closer. The office door creaked and there was deathly silence. Seriosha closed his eyes. He was screaming in his head. He really wanted to stand up and scream at the top of his voice, but gathering all his will into a fist, he clenched his teeth and remained silent. Andrei, on the contrary, did not look scared at all. He gripped the scalpel handle tightly and looked like a cat hiding before a jump. The wait for the inevitable dragged on for so long that Seryozha opened his eyes. He thought that the watchman, not noticing them in the darkness, went off to look further, but this was not so. Lightning struck directly into the lightning rod on the roof of the clinic. It became so light that the boys saw a male silhouette through the screen. It was Uncle Kolya. Thunder, with its unimaginably loud crack, filled everything around and served as a signal for Andrei to take action. The boy squeezed the scalpel with all his strength and struck the first blow. The blade passed through the fabric that separated the victim and the prey, but getting entangled in the folds of Uncle Kolya's old windbreaker did not cause him any damage. The watchman, not expecting such an attack, froze for a moment, but immediately came to his senses and grabbed the child's thin hand. Pulling it with all his strength, he pulled Andrei through the resulting hole in the screen. What are you doing? Uncle Kolya shouted and hit the boy in the face. Did you want to kill me? Yes? He struck again. Andrei's hand weakened and the scalpel fell to the floor with a clang. I'll show you how to do it. The guard smiled from ear to ear and struck again, and then another and another. Seryozha sat against the wall and could not move. He watched his Uncle Kolya mercilessly beat his friend, but could not find the strength to even stand up. The brilliant golden fangs eclipsed his entire consciousness. They laughed at him at his weakness, but he could not take his eyes off them. If only you could stop looking, if only you could stop being afraid. Lightning flashed outside the window again, and its bluish cold light was reflected in a bright flash in the scalpel blood. This saving shine brought the boy out of his trance and inexplicably gave him strength. A spark of determination flashed through his head like surgical steel on a tile floor. Seryozha jumped to his feet and, knocking down the screen, rushed at the guard. Uncle Kolya expected something like this and with a deft movement of his hand knocked him off his feet. The boy was counting on this outcome and fell a little spectacularly. His goal was not a guard at all, because even with all the desire in an open battle, there was practically no chance of defeating him. As soon as Seryozha touched the floor, he immediately grabbed the scalpel, for which the whole performance was, "I'll show you who the girl is here." He thought and delivered several quick blows to Uncle Kolya's leg. The blade was too small to cause serious injuries, but the pain from the cuts forced the guard to let Andrei go. The boy fell unconscious next to Seryozha. His face was swollen in several places, and his mouth and nose were smeared with blood. Uncle Kolya took a step back and found himself out of reach of the annoying scalpel. He pulled back the bloody pant leg with his hand. Several holes were visible on it. "You little bastard." He hissed and turned his gaze to Seryozha. "Well, I'll arrange it for you." But the boy did not pay attention to him. He shook his friend with all his might, trying to bring him to his senses. Andrei opened his swollen eyes with difficulty. The room was shaking, and my head felt like it was stuffed with cotton. He tried to gather the remnants of his consciousness. Into a heap, the world around him smoothly stopped spinning, and the first thing he clearly saw was Uncle Kolya's massive boot flying straight into Seryozha's chin. The blow was quite strong, and the boy groaned and curled up on the floor. The watchman knelt down next to him and leaned on top of him with all his weight. "Look at me." He grabbed the groaning Seryozha by the throat and began to squeeze. "Look at me when I talk to you, you little parasite. Do you think cutting up a man's leg is a good idea?" Seryozha's face turned red, and the veins on his temples bulged. "I bet you don't think so now." Andrei vaguely understood what was happening. He looked around the room and couldn't remember where he was or how he got here. Thoughts flowed sluggishly and reluctantly. "What's going on?" he thought, watching the watchman strangle Seryozha. "Why are they lying? Why am I lying? What is this guy doing? Is he killing him?" And then Andrei had an epiphany. The brain started with great difficulty, like the engine of an old Zhiguley after a long winter, but it started anyway. In an instant, he remembered everything that had happened that evening, and his heart began to beat again with double frequency. It was difficult to move, but Andrei tried. He, staggering slightly, raised himself on his elbow and looked around the room in search of a life-saving scalpel. He was nowhere to be seen. To tell the truth, I couldn't see much at all through his swollen eye. Then he tried to push the watchman in the side with his foot, but he waved him off like an annoying fly. Sirius's face turned blue. He opened and closed his mouth like a fish on dry land, and his eyes incessantly looked at Uncle Kalia's wrinkled, slightly yellowish face. A wet and warm stain spread across the boy's pants. Andre understood that his friend was dying, and this made it very difficult to concentrate. Panic consumed his mind, and the knowledge that when the watchman finished with his first victim, he would immediately move on to the second weighed on him like a mountain. Hinged scissors, straight, pointed. They are used to cut tissue in shallow wounds as well as to decorate the edges of the wound itself. They look like regular, homemade sewing scissors. Two parts connected by a small screw, a sharp cutting part and ring handle. Just such a ring, to Andrei's joy, was sticking out of the pocket of Uncle Kalia's windbreaker. Without thinking twice, the boy grabbed it and pulled the scissors out. Then, before the watchman came to his senses, he hit him in the back with all his might. The sharp end of the scissors easily cut through the fabric of the jacket. The surgical instrument passed between the ribs like a hot knife through butter and buried itself in the guard's liver. Uncle Kalia roared like a wild animal, stepping into a trap. He let go of Seriosha and began to rush around the office, shouting out all the swear words that came into his head at that moment. He tried to get the scissors sticking out of his back but could not. Only two small rings were visible above the surface of the windbreaker. Andre, trying to stay as far as possible from the raging watchman, grabbed his friend by the hands and pulled him through the open doors into the corridor. Seriage's face slowly acquired a natural shade, but two bluish spots remained on his neck, shaped like fingers. "How are you?" asked Andre. Seriage tried to answer, but all that came out was a strange gurgling wheeze. The boy coughed and nodded. "That's good." He tried to lift his friend to his feet, but both boys were very dizzy. Meanwhile, Uncle Kalia tried to take off his jacket, which prevented him from reaching the scissors. With difficulty, he freed both hands from the sleeves, and they hung on the rings of the handle, as if nailed to his back with all its weight. The windbreaker pressed on the end of the instrument sticking out, and the sharp blade dug even deeper into the watchman's liver. Gritting his teeth, he sharply pulled the edge of his windbreaker, and the scissors, like a champagne cork, flew out of Uncle Kalia's body. He examined the surgical instrument, tangled in the tissue, with contempt. The scissors were covered in dark and sticky blood. "Come on, get up." Andre helped his friend get to his feet. The boys held each other and leaned against the wall. "We have to run." Seriosha wheezed barely audibly. "I can't," Andre answered. "I'm dizzy." "And where should we run?" Seriosha did not have time to answer. A freight train named Uncle Kalia flew out of the doors of office number 8 and crashed into the guys at full speed. Andrei was slammed into the wall so sharply that from the surprise he hit the back of his head and lost consciousness again. Sarisha was hit in the leg. The watchman's massive boot hit him right in the shin, which rested against the edge of the plinth. There was an unpleasant click, and acute pain exploded like fireworks in the head of the 9-year-old boy. "Are you hitting on the sly?" Uncle Kalia, not paying any attention to Seriosha crawling away from him, grabbed Andre by the collar and lifted him above the ground. Pressing him against the wall like a rag doll, the guard stabbed him right in the neck with a pair of scissors. A stream of blood splashed onto the whitewash. Andre immediately came to his senses. His legs began to twitch erratically. He tried to hit the guard in the face with his hands, but there was not enough room to swing and only weak slaps came out. A pulsating scarlet stream hit the wall, blood mixed with chalk into disgusting brown lumps. Uncle Kalia continued to hold the boy and watched as life slowly left the child's body. Sirasha, struggling with attacks of nausea and unbearable pain in his leg, crawled further and further. He saw how his best and, probably, only friend was bleeding, but there was nothing he could do. All that was left was to save myself. While the watchman was distracted by his victim, Serioja awkwardly stood up. It was almost impossible to maintain balance without support, and he leaned against the wall. "My leg has already started to swell." Meanwhile, Andre stopped moving completely. His eyes rolled back, and from the outside it seemed as if the boy had no pupils. They knocked. Uncle Kalia threw the lifeless body onto the floor. Now let's get down to the small stuff. He looked around and saw Seriasa clutching the railing with both hands, jumping up the stairs. So we're playing catch-up? Oh, then. The watchman took a couple of quick steps, but then stopped. He spent more energy on dealing with the first boy than he had expected. The wound on the back made itself felt. The shirt was soaked through with blood. It was necessary to conserve the strength that was leaving him. Having caught his breath a little, Uncle Kalia moved on, but now much more slowly. We need to run, Seriosha thought, to run and not look back. But how can you run with such a leg? And where? The only option was the fire escape, although I'm unlikely to be able to get to it in this condition. On one leg, I can't look out the window. You'll get out, that's for sure. Frantically turning over all possible rescue options. In his head, he himself did not notice how he managed to jump to the second floor and then to the third. The watchman slowly followed him, not lagging behind. Well, I jumped from him to the very top, and then what? I won't jump on one leg until he falls from loss of blood. Or will I? The idea is not a bad one, but the only trouble is that when the stairs end, I will be left without a railing, and along the flat corridor, there is no chance of breaking away from it. Two legs always beat one. And then an idea came into Seriasha's head that could prolong his escape for a short time. Perhaps just enough to simply survive the one catching up. One day, he and Andre were severely scolded for climbing into the attic of their house and running around it, thereby wildly annoying the quarrelsome neighbor on the fourth floor. Seriosha even remembered her words exactly, as if she had said it not a year and a half ago, but yesterday. "Hooligan," she shouted, adjusting her cat-like glasses, which had long since gone out of fashion, on her nose. "I'll kick your ass. What the hell are you thinking? They've adopted the fashion of running on the ceiling, and if the plaster falls down, who will fix it? What are you doing?" The boys had a blast then, but that didn't matter now. The important thing was that the clinic also had to have an attic, and Seriosha was going to find it. Firstly, if it was difficult for Uncle Kolya to climb an inclined ladder, then what can we say about a vertical one? And secondly, from the roof Seriosha could gain access to the treasured fire escape, which gave him some hope of salvation. "Where are you running?" A slightly out-of-breath guard asked from somewhere behind. "You're driving yourself into a dead end." But the boy did not listen to him and did not even look back. He remembered his friend's advice and looked straight ahead. Fear retreated somewhere to the back of the brain, leaving cold calculation and faith in success to rule the roost. Seriosha climbed step by step as he had previously walked along the cornice, one at a time, and every step brought him closer to the end of the climb. There is only one flight left to the fourth floor, now half. The boy prayed that the exit to the attic was in this part of the building. After all, he could no longer reach the opposite end of the corridor. 3 steps left, 2, 1. Perhaps his prayers were heard, or he was lucky, if you can call a person who finds himself in such a situation lucky. One way or another, to his left, about 10 meters away, a small ladder was visible, and above it, in the ceiling, a hatch. Getting out onto the roof, Seriosha heard Uncle Kolya shouting after him. "You can't run away from fate. Stop lying to yourself." But he didn't pay attention and climbed. The wind was raging in earnest. Lightning streaked the sky here and there, and the air smelled of ozone. Seriosha stood up to his full height and took a breath, but the stench of hospital detergents, which had already become boring, did not go away. It even seemed to him for a second that he would be doomed to hear it for the rest of his life if he managed to escape. A hand appeared from the dormer window connecting the attic and the roof. Uncle Kolya, despite all the boy's hopes, was still alive. He grabbed Seriosha's leg, that same leg. A dull pain hit his head, and the boy, losing his balance, fell onto the slate, trying to free himself from the death grip. He hit the guard several times with his good leg, but this had no effect. Uncle Kolya held tightly. Perhaps the strength flowed out of his body through a small hole in his back, but he was still able to hold the 9-year-old boy, according to consolidate his success. He tried to pull the victim through the window into the attic, but the shoe he was holding onto slipped off his foot, and Seriosha rolled head over heels to the edge of the roof, the metal parapet, which, according to the architect's idea, was supposed to stop it from falling, flew off its long corroded fastenings and flew down. At the last moment, Saryasha miraculously grabbed onto a drain and hung 15 meters above the ground. "Hey," Uncle Kalia shouted, crawling onto the roof. "That one fell there, or what?" Carefully stepping on the slate. The watchman came closer and saw the whitened children's fingers clutching a thin tin sheet. "Well done." Uncle Kolya chuckled contentedly, "and I thought that your friend was lying to me. Not one of the timid ones. I think that's what he said. Don't you remember?" He looked over the edge and nodded his head questioningly. "No, and I remember. That's exactly what he said. We are not timid." Then I immediately thought that he was lying. "I've seen so many people like you, and they're all the same. As soon as the brave men hear the village simpleton, they immediately piss in their pants and ask to see their mother. Just innocent sheep. The tearful eyes will open wider. 'Let us go, uncle, please.' What about me? Am I just doing all this? As if I'm the only one who needs it. You will thank yourself later. Although, who am I kidding?" Uncle Kalia waved his hand in frustration. "Do you know what kind of score you have on me? Your friend is the 7th, and therefore you will be the 8th. And until this day, everyone as one lied that they weren't afraid. A person cannot help but be afraid. He made us this way." The watchman pointed his finger somewhere upward, which means there is a reason for this. He walked even closer to the edge of the roof. "But you weren't afraid." "No, of course there were tears and wet pants, but no one had given me change yet. And by the way, I'm a holy man if you think about it. Did you know, for example, that all those who die a violent death go straight to heaven? Yes. Just like that, you're off to heaven. Do you want to go to heaven?" Uncle Kalia stepped on Saryosha's toes with his boot. "Yeah, I doubt it. You really wanted to cut my leg, yes. I saw it in your eyes. It was not fear, but hatred. And your friend actually repaid the lucky ticket with a stab in the back. No, that's not how things are done. All I want is ordinary human good." "Good," he couldn't finish. From the loss of blood, the watchman's consciousness became clouded and his legs gave way. Like a tree cut down by a woodcutter, it began to tilt towards the edge of the roof. Saryosha heard the watchman falter, and then the pressure on his fingers decreased. Wanting to see what was happening, he raised his head and managed to see Uncle Kalia flying past him head first. The boy reflexively closed his eyes and unclenched his fingers. Saryosha fell down. For him, neither his parents, who had probably already called all the morgues, desperate to find their son, no longer existed, nor Andrei, who was lying on the old brown tile in a pool of his own blood, nor even the disgusting golden fangs of Uncle Kalia, which had haunted him all evening. He was flying and thought that for the second time that day, by an absurd accident, he was experiencing the feeling of free fall, enjoying the wonderful feeling of weightlessness. He watched as the first drops of rain, finally falling from the leaden clouds, caught one of the drops of soft coolness touched his face, and darkness fell. "In peace, alive?" Andrei asked in fright. Saryosha opened his eyes and, puzzledly touching the lump on the back of his head, looked around. The sun lazily crept over the horizon, and somewhere in the distance, a thunderstorm thundered. "What happened?" Andrei, hearing his friend's voice, breathed out a sigh of relief. "Well, you scared us. You fell off the ledge." "What, don't you remember?" With difficulty, answered Saryosha. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had just woken up from a terrible nightmare, but he was no longer able to remember what he had dreamed about. "Wait," Saryosha's throat suddenly became dry. "Who are we?" "Like whom?" "Me and Uncle Kalia." He ran for water